Rust iterator Annie, it's a function. It's a function that only works if you pass it another function. It's one of those closure scenarios. We've learned about closures in Rust. Iterator Annie is a function that is standard. It comes included with Rust automatically. It's a function which, when passed an iterator, will return true, but only if any of the elements are satisfied by the predicate. Otherwise, it returns false. So this is basically, it returns a true or a false, right? Does it return a true or false? But when I run the code, it actually returns true or false. Okay, that's what I thought. So you'd use this just to find if any of the elements, say like in a list or a vector or an array or a tuple, will have an element inside of it that matches your criteria. So you have an array of numbers here, like say 1, 2, 3, and then you apply iterator.Annie, and then you can pass in a closure and check to see if any of the values match your criteria. In this case, x equals to 2. And if it returns true, that means that your criteria was met for this match of items. So it's kind of like a search, except for it doesn't return anything other than whether the element is present inside of it. It's a nice, clever way. I like this to be able to sort of validate, right? You could validate input data, check to make sure that fields are present within an iterator, right? So you've got a list of things and it must match a certain criteria. So this is a nice way to also check to make sure that all the boxes are checked. It's a nice way to do that. There's a couple different ways that you can write an iterator to use the iterator, right? So in a list, so if you've got a vector here, which is a vec1, 2, 3, you can either say vec1 dot iterator Annie and then destructure it with a reference to the data. Or you could say into iterator, which no destructuring required. Makes the syntax a little bit easier. Although, if you look at the difference, there's more characters on this line than this line. But the closure is simpler to look at. So we can see here the double pipes. That's going to represent the parameters that are going to be passed into your closure. And this denotes the start of your closure. And then the end of your closure is the end of the statement, where a semicolon or a curly brace might be included. And it's really nice that the Rust compiler doesn't require any additional syntax than this when passing an enclosure, because it's meant to be, a concise amount of code. Something that fits onto a single line. Yes, you can do multi-line if you really wanted to. If you start getting too many lines, it's probably better not to use a closure, just to use a regular function that you define higher up in your code. So it's a great function. I love it. If any element within your list of items is it needs to meet the criteria. If it matches, then it will return true. Otherwise, if it doesn't match, it'll return false. It's a nice little included little function that's automatically available to you in Rust.